this somewhere. You did them good? Okay.
The, I gotta move your things because this is for me.
Okay.
So I'll do all of this.
Get too many windows open.
Me, I know. All of this is part of,
The MC.
uh-huh. So this is before, this and this are before you. And then I'll introduce you. And then you could come up. And
Okay.
then you can take this or one of those microphones, whatever you want.
Well, if I'm it's standing here advancing, I may as well just use that now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd probably work.
Well,
Yeah. Just making sure. Okay.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is a good microphone.
Hi, everybody. We're going to get started here in a little bit. If you want to grab your seats and maybe use the restroom one more time before we get started, please go ahead. Have your seats. I know a lot of people are having trouble. But I don't want to wait too long.
Oh, yeah. So I had like,
Oh, from over there?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll blame you. people coming in last minute, so I thought I'd give it a few moments.
Let's say confirm for the comment. I got the email today. It says that, yeah, I'll confirm. I think Michelle is ready, CCR, and alternate her as well. And I'll put it on top of your box you can see, but.
That's great news.
The morning is now built on that, right? Do you have anyone else to invite or? Any speaking again?
I need somebody to do the, Steve's gonna moderate that panel. But I need somebody to do it.
Is that,
That could be anybody's.
did we like reserve that for anyone that's?
Usually I put it. if I'm doing it, yeah. But it doesn't have to.
I mean, you should do it. I don't.
Well,
A lot of stuff, yeah.
that's
No, I
what
get it, yeah.
I told Steve, like, being the host and that's a lot.
Let's sit down with Harrison.
I'm the host of our panel.
Okay, good.
I'm the Steve Martin, Steve Harvey.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Who's doing been doing for Steve Harvey? That's always Steve Harvey.
No,
Didn't the dude who passed away or something like that?
I think, yeah, I can't either.
I don't know any score for 70s to like early 2000s TV personalities. Yeah, I feel like he's one who passed away recently. Like he had like liver cancer or something.
Something like
Yeah.
that. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I like it. Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to ask you to take your seats real quick so we can get started. I am Sara Buchanan, the Executive Vice President for San Diego Housing Federation, and I'm really happy to have you all here tonight. I know we'll have some more people trickling in as that parking situation is kind of brutal, so thank you all for trekking it all the way up the hill in the heat. We really appreciate it. Hopefully it's cool enough in here for you right now. So thank you again for being part of our conversation tonight. Before we get started, I wanted to do a little bit of an intro of who we are as an organization. For 36 years, the San Diego Housing Federation has brought together people around affordable housing, specifically creating opportunities to connect, share ideas, and work towards solutions. Tonight is a great example of that work. We also have a lot coming up, so hopefully you can join us and we can see you again. On September 3rd, we're actually hosting our Fundamentals of Design and Development. It's a housing typologies conversation, and one of our speakers is actually present with Lifebox. If you could say hi, Charlie. We'll also be learning from Vino with Catholic Charities about styrofoam core that just got approved through the US. So we're really excited about that. And we're going to have some folks from Swinnerton and Timber Labs on the mass timber conversation. So hopefully you can join us. Our conference is coming up on October 1st. It'll be at the Marriott Marquis, and we'll have wonderful conversations throughout the day and lots of learning. This year is a little bit special. For the morning session, we're going to be talking about Proposition 1. So hopefully you can join us on that conversation. And our afternoon session, our lunch keynote, is actually going to be a Family Feud style game show, and I will be the host. So I'm really excited about that. So join us, and maybe you get to play. The winners of that actually get to have free admission to our conference in next year. So we're really excited about that. And then on October 23rd, we're going to host our next property tour with Kimball Highland. That one's down in National City, and it's with Community Housing Works. And the city of National City will be there, as well as San Ysidro Health. We're going to be talking about both properties, the new construction and the rehabilitation, and how they have developed the healthcare system within those properties and all of the rerouting of the street. So it's a really cool, really cool property. So before we get into everything, I want to give you some logistics. Our restrooms, there's 2 on either side. They're basically toward the middle. You can go out through either exit and walk around this way or walk around this way, and they're both there. There's also water fountains next to both bathrooms. We also have these wonderful community, here we go. these town hall community forums. So if you have a question that you would like to ask, or if you would like to speak to this Congresswoman directly, please make sure to note those. And then we have a blue bin over here where you can submit them. Please submit those by 6:15 tonight. And make sure to add your seat number to them. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from our community about the cost of living in San Diego and what people are experiencing and what we can do at every level of government to make San Diego a place where we can afford to live and thrive. To help ground us here in San Diego, I'm pleased to introduce someone who has spent much of his career working at the intersection of housing, community development, policy, and the built environment, helping the San Diego Housing Federation be the voice of affordable housing. Please help me welcome to the stage President and CEO of San Diego Housing Federation, Stephen Russell.
Clearly, I've got my friends and family here tonight, so thank you for showing up. I'm really here to give a framework for like why is it so expensive to live in San Diego? There's a history of the housing crisis here, and I'm going to tell you everything about that history in about 17 minutes. So we'll stay on time here. We're at 5:45. Yes, I'm Stephen Russell. I'm President and CEO of the San Diego Housing Federation. I'm so pleased to be a co-host of this event tonight with the Congresswoman. I really want to give a shout out to my staff who put this together, and especially Julieta, who is just a phenomenal. She probably talked to every single person here with specific instructions on what to do. She is a phenomenon, and she is such an asset to not just our organization, but to our whole sector. So I want to give a big hand to Julieta Nelas, who's probably out directing people right now. So building an affordable San Diego is the theme tonight. What I want to do is really walk you through, first of all, I guess the first question is, who here loves calling San Diego home? Okay, if there's any hands that aren't up, we should talk afterwards. Most places aren't this nice. Well, that's really a big issue here. People love calling this home. A lot of people have lived their entire lives and served this community their entire lives, and yet it's becoming really challenging to do so. And that's a moral crime, quite frankly, that we ask people to come here to spend their lives. And we used to have communities like North Park where someone could work at an insurance agent all their lives. They could work at the grocery store as a checker. They could plan on retiring into that very same community. And now you look at a place like North Park, and it's the poster child for what's happened to this region and affordable housing. It's become unaffordable. The primary driver of the cost of living squeeze, people talk about, everything else, gas and groceries, all these other things. Well, those fluctuate. The problem with housing is not only is it the biggest part of our household expenditure, it's also the most immobile. It goes up, it doesn't go down. It isn't like the market is fluctuating. So next month your rent is going to go down when demand is down, and the following month it's going to go up. Once you fix your rent, once you get a rent that you are comfortable with or that you can manage, it's fixed or going up. That's the only two options. All the other commodities, all the other expenses in life essentially tend to fluctuate. And so it's unique among the fact that, our income and wages are actually, going up kind of on par with inflation. What that means is we're just holding steady. We're not making progress as individuals. We're not able to plan ahead. And everyday essentials become a real burden. And because people are paying so much in rent, it's become a real hardship. And it's going to become an increasingly challenging environment in the future here as we see that folks who are retiring with less and less income, less and less equity in housing as the years go by. We're going to see, I think the figure was 10,000 people a day for the next 10 years retiring. And they're going to be retiring without adequate resources to last their lives. And that's because of the high cost of living and the widening gap between the incomes and the living costs enforced by housing. So question, what does it cost? I'm going to give you the answer too, but what does it cost to live here? For an average 2-bedroom apartment here in the San Diego County region, it requires a wage of $50.12 an hour to get by, to have that apartment. More honestly, it's probably two family members with $25 an hour or 3 family members at 17, but households are they're working harder than ever to actually get by. And that's almost 3 times the average, 3 times the minimum wage here in San Diego. And when you look at key professions that are absolutely critical to the functioning of society, whether it be a medical assistant, retail sales, janitors, childcare, none of them make even a third of that. right? So it's really problematic that the cost of living is far outpaced the wages. And we've got growth in two major sectors here in San Diego. We have a lot of growth in the high end of the high tech, biotech, high end jobs. We have a lot of growth in the hospitality industry, which is very low paying relative to those other jobs. So we're growing. This problem is growing. It is not going away right now. But these are essential workers. The story I often tell when we talk about the essential workers, Hotel Del Coronado is 1,200 employees. Not one of them can afford to live in Coronado, and they're commuting from places like Spring Valley, from I was going to say Riverside, but Lakeside, Tijuana, or living in their cars. And you talked to Rip Ripito recently retired from the convention center. He told me that with his employees at the convention center, he knew, and he's a great man, a pastor. He wanted to know what the lives of his people were like, and he could tell you how many people were living in San Diego, Lakeside, Riverside as well, Temecula, Tijuana, or in their cars. So they're aware of the fact that the wages are not supporting people to live. And in fact, one of the things that he used to do is provide cots so that people who would leave extra early to make sure they built a buffer into their schedule to cross into San Diego, cross the border, that they would have a place to rest. If the border crossing were not too brutal and they got in early, they could catch a few winks before their job started. But these are accommodations to an inhuman situation. They're not answers. They're accommodations. So housing takes a lot of our income. 80% of extremely low-income households in San Diego spend more than half of their income on housing. And that means that there's much less left for food, for health, for their future, for transit, for basically a good quality of life. And that's, how does this crisis affect us? People are asking, will my next rent increase put my housing at risk? Am I going to be priced out of the community that I've built my life in? If an unexpected expense pops up, can I cover it without falling behind on bills? And how much more time will I spend on commuting because I have to live so far away? Recent story, I was talking to someone from Chula Vista. They were talking to the principal at the school where their kids went in Chula Vista. She lives in Menifee because she can't be any closer than that. Now, granted, she could probably find more affordable housing a little bit farther south, but the quality of schools, as a principal in the education system, she's acutely aware that maybe she doesn't want to live in certain school districts. That is its own kind of moral challenges when we are sequestering poorer families in neighborhoods with poor education. We're compounding the challenge. So people are commuting. So she is going to Menifee so her children can go to a school district up there, and she's commuting every day to Chula Vista to do that. That's not so unusual. So according to the California Housing Partnership, we need 129,000 homes affordable to low-income families. The demand is growing. We talked about that. The main driver is that we are still growing. People talk about this exodus from California. The truth is we are continuing to grow with new jobs in this region, new high-paying jobs. And those new high-paying jobs generate jobs down the line. Those people don't serve themselves in restaurants, right? They don't mow their own lawns. They're paying for people to do their nails. There's all these jobs that service folks, or taking care of their children, taking care of their parents. All of these things are costs that when you bring in a job, a high-paying job, you're generating demand in these other areas. And that's great that we're generating opportunities for folks, but not if they can't afford to live here and if they're traveling long distances for relatively low wages. Obviously, high development costs affect, so any new construction, major inputs into cost of housing. If there's land, there's money, there's labor, there's materials, right? And those things are all going up in price. So that means that anything we build new has a high price tag associated with it. When people say, why are we only building luxury housing? First of all, it's not exactly luxury. That's kind of appropriating a name we should give to the folks who are the 1%. That's luxury when you have peacocks strolling the grounds and things like that. Just having a pool and a nice community room is just kind of what we should expect. It's not luxury. But the reason that we build so many apartments that have rents starting at $3,500 each is that's what the banks will finance. If you can't generate enough income to pay off the note, to pay off these development costs, the bank isn't going to let you build. So it isn't simply a matter of just mandating that people build cheaper housing. But the answer is that we do need resources to subsidize that housing, and we lack the dedicated public funding in San Diego to build the affordable homes at scale that we need. We had a banner year last year. I want to say 3,800 units came online. And I'm looking at Lisa to like, I should be looking at Thomas probably. But it was about 38. So in a banner year, when we did the most affordable housing that we've done in years, it was less than 4,000 units. And we need 129,000. So you can do the math. I'm not going to try on stage. I've learned not to do math on stage. It doesn't come out well. But it's a long time that we would be building at the rate that we're building if we keep it up. But why? This is the one slide that, to me, absolutely tells the story of why we're in this crisis. This is a note from San Diego Housing Commission's Affordable Housing Preservation Study of 2020. It is a textbook that you should all look up. Google it when you get home. SDHC, Affordable Housing Preservation. It is a wealth of resources about the housing situation in housing. And this one chart from page 9 is one of the most important ones. It tells the story that in the year 2000, how many of you know what NOAA is? When we talk about NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, right? This is housing, just rents for a low price. If you go to parts of National City, maybe inland in these neighborhoods, you'll find something that's cheaper. If you go to Lakeside, it's going to be cheaper. It's not subsidized. It's just that market forces say that this is going to be cheaper to live in. It's naturally affordable. All of North Park used to be naturally affordable, except for those houses right along the park and right along the Mission Valley Edge. City Heights used to be very affordable. But in the year 2000, we had in the city of San Diego 92,000 units that were naturally affordable to low-income families. 92,000. Flash forward a decade, we had under 60,000 that were naturally affordable. In 2020, we were down to almost, to less than 30,000. So we've lost a third of our total housing stock that was affordable over those decades. And when you look at it, it's not that we've destroyed any of that housing. You look at the total production. We had a production that has increased. As you look across the chart, the total housing production is actually, or housing stock, I should say, has edged up year over year. But the housing that was naturally affordable, the dark blue, has been bought up by investors. The properties have been upgraded a little bit and put back on the market at a much higher income. So we didn't destroy 60,000 housing units. We upmarketed them. We marketed them out of the reach of our families here. And that is the heart of our crisis right now. And that is the housing we have to replace. So when people say, we just need to, why can't we build more housing that's available to those families? Well, how are we going to pay for it? Affordable housing doesn't finance itself. It needs to be financed like anything else, and we need the public resources. But this chart is scary because when you look at what we're projecting forward in 2030 and 2040, we're talking about tens of thousands more people who will not be able to find a home that they can actually afford. The housing crisis doesn't impact everybody equally. You can see that we have severe deficits at the lowest income tiers, that we have a deficit of 45,000 homes when we're talking about very low income, extremely low income housing. That's lower than 30% of AMI. You have 47,000 home deficit that is affordable to folks at that 50% AMI and below. And once you get above 80% AMI, you're no longer affordable. You're either moderate income or high income. There's actually a surplus of housing available for you, surplus of choices to look at. And there's actually something we call the North Park effect. I was at ULI. Anyone here from ULI? Okay. So you may have been, it was one of the real estate forums up north here. And some of the developers were complaining about the North Park effect, which was, we've built so many apartments in North Park that tenants have choices. They're taking their time at looking at things. They're pushing back on the pricing. They're looking at amenities, and we're not able to raise our rents as quickly. And they're practically pulling their hair out and describing the situation. Now, I've been in housing policy for long enough that we listened to the BIA and ULI and the other folks who said, gosh, take the shackles off of us, make the land use easier, make the processing easier, and we will build so much housing that, yes, we can solve the affordable housing crisis for you. We did all those things. And the outcomes that they're bemoaning are exactly what we hoped would happen, is that renters would have choices. But the choices don't extend down to the lower tier income because, again, the new housing isn't going to get cheaper. Over time, it feels cheaper because inflation floats around it. And so if we could fix somebody's rent with a new building today at $3,500, in 10 years and 20 years, that same $3,500 is enough to pay the mortgage on that place. So the rents aren't necessarily going to be up. But they're not going to come down if the supply of housing increases, unless we have a catastrophic economic event here. Rents are not going down. We can slow the rate at which they increase. But what that means is that 90,000 homes that we lost, the affordability, we have to find a way of replacing them. We need public resources to do so. Barriers to building, we talked about land, labor, materials, permitting and approving, complex financing for affordable housing. It can take years to put together a package of financing for affordable housing. And it's still not enough. Necessity of public funds is the private market cannot independently build homes that lower income earners can afford. So we struggle We need the public investment to close the gap. And without those resources, affordable housing development doesn't take place. So partnership is critical. We need government to unlock essential funding at the federal, state, and local levels. We need developers to manage the risk and execute the construction. And we need our communities to help guide the process to ensure that projects serve actual neighborhood needs. But why are we in this crisis again? This is my favorite chart. How many of you have been in a meeting where I've shown this particular chart before? Okay, I'm not getting out enough, clearly. I need to tell the story more often. So this is the story of the housing crisis in one slide. At one end here, we have year 2004. The far end, we have 2024. This represents the total housing production in the county over those 2 decades. And you can see in 2004, we were almost at 16,000 units. There's a recession in there that many of you are familiar with, the real estate crash. You can see the dip that we were producing under 4,000 a year in those years 2009, 2010. And then it's been a spotty recovery over time. So one takeaway is we were building a lot. Housing crisis cut the production of new housing, and now we're climbing back out of that, especially with a lot of the new policies. I think San Diego in particular has been really progressive about zoning and making things by right and getting the permit processing to produce housing, and it's resulted in more production and the North Park effect. So one takeaway is you see the change in production over years. Second takeaway that is really important is the colors, the orange and the blue. The orange is the multifamily housing, and the blue in any given year is the single family housing. Before the recession, we were building more single family homes than we were multifamily homes. That drop went, so then, and that they both dropped precipitously going into 2009. Coming out of that crisis, now we're building more multifamily than single family. And there's a simple answer to that, is we've built on most of the land suitable for single family homes. We have a few 10 to 40,000 home lots maybe in Otay Mesa. And other than that, it's onesies, twosies, small developments all over the county that are available. So we're not building single family homes in any great number. And in recent years, when you look at that single family number, a significant percentage of those are actually ADUs. They're classified not as multifamily, but as single family. So we're seeing that the production is almost all multifamily. We're building in urban areas. We need to build in urban areas for our future, for our climate future, for our economic opportunity. People need to be close to jobs. So takeaway one is the change in production. Takeaway two is the change between single and multifamily. The killer in all of this is that black line across the top, that 16,000. That's the average over time, very broad average of how many homes we needed in any given year based on births over deaths, what we call natural increase, and new job generation, because jobs are the generator for housing demand, and births, people forming new households because they move out, they get families, and they need a home. So we haven't met that number. Look at how many times we've failed to meet that number of 16,000 a year. This is not a deficit. That's a one-time deficit. You zero out the bank account, you start again. No, this is cumulative. So all of those years that we did not build enough housing, that's where we got to the need for 130,000 homes that are at low income that we need. We just didn't build enough, and we haven't built enough. We haven't built enough to meet that need. Actually, it was 2003. I think we actually met that key benchmark figure. And in the past, it was really easy to, like Mira Mesa, Pardee owned most of Mira Mesa. They could do the market projections, see how much housing the region could absorb. They would build that much in that year. And they do this year after year after year. Well, we don't have Mira Mesas anymore. And if we were to build the 130,000 units we need, and we were to build them like Mira Mesa in single family homes, we would need 5 more Mira Mesas to actually meet this deficit. And think about what that means, because we don't have the land of 5 Mira Mesas available for that. So it's not going to happen. And this crisis, this deficit is something we're still stuck with. And the formula, how many of you have read the book, Homelessness is a Housing Problem? I know a couple, okay. I was counting on that. If you didn't raise your hand, I'd be really bothered. The basic formula, if I was trying to create a formula or a recipe for homelessness, I've got the recipe. It's a very simple one. Create lots of high-paying jobs, a really successful economy like we have here, and don't build the housing for them. Because they're going to find housing. These new employees, they're going to struggle a little bit. They're going to pay more than they want. They're going to go to neighborhoods farther south maybe than they wanted to. But with the jobs we see on Sorrento Mesa in particular, high-tech, biotech, these are high-wage jobs. Those folks don't go without housing. They rent something. And in most cases, in a constrained market, they're renting housing that used to be occupied by a lower income family. Or they're buying in a neighborhood where people weren't buying before, or where people who were renting homes out are now selling, cashing in. So they're buying homes in places like North Park, or they're renting things like in downtown San Diego, which is kind of perverse that a central business district is actually a bedroom community now. Most people, a lot of people who live in downtown are actually commuting to jobs up in Sorrento Valley, but they're able to pay the rents down here. But folks who have really good wages don't do without housing. They probably pay too much, like all of us, but they don't do without. They take it from, they rent it from people who, in places that used to belong to other folks. Those folks similarly rent places that maybe they hadn't thought of before. They're pushing those people out. And when you get to the bottom of the ladder, where there's nowhere else to go, families double up, triple up, leave the region, or go homeless. That is our housing crisis. This slide to me is the one slide that basically tells the story. Why are we there? So 4 pillars for a more affordable San Diego. We need to accelerate production of all kinds of housing, all kinds of housing. It's not just tax credits, not just so-called luxury. We need to preserve the existing affordable housing supply so it remains accessible for future generations. Famously, Blackstone came in here and bought a huge portfolio that came out of 6,000 units that came available all of a sudden. The houses were all natural, the apartments were all naturally affordable. They paid cash, they snapped them up, and now we're talking, my gosh, how many years ago? It's almost 10 years ago now. I think they did that. Rents are up more than 40% in that portfolio that they sold, that they bought, that the local foundation sold. We also need to protect existing residents, try to keep them in place as much as possible. Keeping them housed is really critical. Keeping people housed is far cheaper and far less traumatic than letting them become homeless and then trying to intervene. So coming up with programs, special shallow rent subsidies that keep people in their homes are going to be a critical part of the solution, because that is far cheaper, far kinder, far more effective than waiting till people are on the streets and then trying to pick them up. And we need to do advocacy to empower communities to shape housing policy, guide public investment, and champion equitable solutions. And that's why I'm really glad to see everybody here today, because you are all ultimately advocates for affordable housing, whether you're doing it formally or informally. I'm hoping you can walk away today with a few bits of information that you can have a conversation over the bar, at a table, when you're doing your laundry next to somebody. Talk about these things, because people want to know. People want to understand this crisis, and people want to do something about it. It's going to take collective action to really be successful. And we're going to have to make sure that especially our local politicians know that housing is a priority. And yes, you don't just say it on the campaign trail, because we hear that a lot. People say housing is a top priority, and then something else is where we actually spend the money. It's so fundamental. It's so fundamental that we need housing in order to survive and to thrive. We believe that the Federation, in our role, unites residents, developers, and policymakers to turn these 4 strategies into reality. We have a basic needs coalition. We have some of the members here where we talk about not just housing, but housing, healthcare, childcare, homelessness services, and I'm always forgetting number 5. One of my coalition members. Can you think of number 5? Homelessness, housing, healthcare, the big one. Who can forget that? So we are continuing to advocate in that regard. We need to, local and regional government need to improve zoning laws. City of San Diego has done great. We need to get the rest of the region to catch up with many of those laws. State government has set good production goals as incentives for us to produce more housing, but we need committed money. We need money every year. When what's happening right now at the state, if you follow the budget at all, the governor has been coming out with a 0 budget for housing. And then all of us advocates fight for things. And then at the end, they come to some kind of compromise and there's money there. And it's usually 300 to 500 million, maybe $1 billion, but we don't know. We don't know until the final decision is made. And it's not committed to be more than 1 year. And for folks who are trying to build a pipeline of housing, certainty is one of the key factors that we need in development. So people need to be able to project into future years there will be money to do these projects. We do not have a dedicated revenue stream at the state for gap financing. And we are, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this, voting in November on a ballot measure, Proposition 1. How many of you know what Proposition 1 is? Okay, then good. I'm glad, because then you should all be hearing this. Proposition 1 would create $11.25 billion for affordable housing, for home ownership for veterans, for all kinds of programs to really help address I won't say solve, address this housing crisis. So please remember Prop 1 when you go into the booth. We will be doing more communications in a voter guide around other issues that are taking place at the state. But Prop 1 is the thing that is really going to make it possible that we continue to build affordable housing here in the San Diego region. So you're here to share your experiences with our representative. Is our representative here yet? So I'll keep talking. Okay, thank you. You're going to regret that. No, and so we're here. Your perspectives are going to be important. What I'm going to do is ask for questions because typically, I like to run through this fairly quickly. But if you have questions, I'd like to answer. And we've got other experts in the room that can help us with that as well. But what we're looking for today is that your experiences, your perspectives, your ideas can shape the conversation about what our communities need. And we have a special guest today who's in a unique position to help us achieve those goals. The federal government this year just did the first comprehensive housing bill in, now I am looking at my PHA director here, 20 years? Thomas, how long has it been since we did a comprehensive housing bill? 30, you're right, it was 30 years because I remember talking to a crowd where I realized that most of the crowd was not even born the last time we did a comprehensive housing bill. Decades, longer than Thomas has been here around. Yes, definitely. So, we are seeing what's really compelling about that in a time that is so divided, in a time where we can't seem to agree on anything, and so much of the government seems to be about a bid for endless power in Washington. The Congress came together and came up with a bill that met everybody's needs because everybody needs a home. Everybody's constituents needs a home. And so it was really remarkable that passed. This was the 21st Century Road to Home Act. Clever, these titles. I wish they would just call them the housing bill, be easier. It was great, bipartisan support. 84 senators voted for it. You don't get 84 of anybody voting for anything now. It is that important, that bipartisan an action. And so we're really pleased, of course, that we have representatives in our region who are able to come to those kind of compromises and bring their colleagues along. We're going to get to, of course, meet with one of them in a little bit. So at this point, if you have questions for me, I've got time for 2 questions because I think our guest has arrived. So are there questions about any of the material that I went through here today? We will post this, if it's not already posted, on our website, which is housingsandiego.org, right there. You can see that. If you want to talk to any of us at the organization, you go to the page about us and you see our pictures, you click there, it will generate an email to us. We'll be able to respond. But really, most importantly, I would say when you go to the ballot box in November, please remember Proposition 1. It's the first one. We hope that will benefit us. It only needs a majority to pass, but it's absolutely essential to us having the resources we need to pass this measure. And any last questions? Are we? One more question? Okay, more questions here. Yes, sir. No, absolutely, it cannot. It cannot. It is a critical piece. It has to happen. We have to build more housing so that if people had a choice between these old Huffman six-pack, these old motel-style apartments in North Park versus a highly amenitized tower, most of these people with more income are gonna go there and not displace a family. So we need to provide enough housing at the moderate income level so that people are not displacing others.
Housing is so unaffordable when you have Blackstone buying 6,000 units at a time, basically monopolized. We are the most monopolized market in the United States by the large person.
We are, and so we really run the risk of becoming, if you think about REITs with shareholders in New York who are charging all of our residents half their income in rent, we are shipping the prosperity of our region into the pockets of shareholders in New York. And shareholders' rights are supreme to all other rights in our society right now. It feels like there's citizens' rights don't seem to matter. Environmental justice doesn't matter. The rights of workers don't seem to matter much. But the shareholders' rights are driving the market right now. Are they the only driver? No, they can only operate like this because there is such a shortage. They can corner the market. They have the capital. They can come in with cash and buy homes. where other people have to try to get a loan, and so cash transactions go more easily. That being said, we still do need to make sure that we are building more housing in that moderate to high income, because then we want to create the North Park effect consciously in other communities. We want there to be so much housing that people have choices about housing, and landlords think twice about raising their rents. So I know personally, I'm both a homeowner and a renter living in an apartment at a price point right now where if they raise it anymore, I could go from a really antiquated 1972 apartment, I could go to something on the 6th floor with a view of Point Loma for about the same price. So yes, the market forces, and that's everywhere in mid-city. If you get to the 6th floor, you can see Point Loma. Who knew, right? Until we got to 6 stories there. We need to build housing at all levels. We also need to work on, the whole idea of we're kind of housing sharecroppers right now, right? People own the housing we're in. We're generating the money, giving half of our income to folks. We're not building equity when we do that. We need to find ways to create more ownership products as well. And one of the things that is a policy direction that people are sometimes surprised the Federation is really supportive of is we need to reform condominium defect litigation. We need to create a natural market for home ownership that is entry level. And because then people will be able to build up that equity, and if they're handing over a lot of their check for their housing, well, at least it's creating their own equity, right? And then we as a region become more economically independent, more prosperous. Right now, with the situation as it is, we are shipping most of our income into the pockets of out-of-state owners. So, yes. Okay.
So it's kind of a couple part question of things that you said. So you're saying that there's no land available to produce what is needed. And I understand that's potentially why they're doing a lot of density, or gives an excuse to do it. But if we have people that are losing their subsidies right now, their vouchers and different things, how in the future can we be like saying that we're going to be providing these things when currently it's not able to be provided, or people are going to be, potentially facing homelessness? And how would that not have the North Park effect come in because the subsidies are no longer available? So that housing would need to be potentially bought up by someone like BlackRock.
So I think there's several questions wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
One is there's a whole segment of our population that needs housing assistance to stay housed. And what is being provided by the federal government is totally inadequate to the task. And when you look at the actual amount for housing vouchers, inflation is already far outstripping what the allocation from HUD was far outstripping that. So the absolute value of our dollars we got for vouchers stayed essentially the same while the cost of housing and all other costs rose. So we need to get the federal government to recognize that more important than, I could list a host of things that are happening right now, including a ballroom. There are more important things for the American public, and one of them is to make sure that people are not forced out of their homes. Rental subsidies are critical. Project-based vouchers, so that the unit we build, essentially it has that voucher attached, so you get that reduced rent. Those are critical. We also need to build more homeowner opportunities. And if we can get people who are doing well in affordable housing, able to save some money because they're not paying it all in rent, they need to be able to take one step up to actual ownership of either a condo or a row home or a townhome. We need to create there's rungs in the ladder, in the housing ladder, that are missing. We need to recreate those. The North Park effect is really about making sure that middle and upper income folks aren't poaching the housing away from folks who are already living in their homes. And yes, we tear down some, maybe typically 2 to 4 homes to build a 60 or 80 unit project. So the net increase is great. Locating it well is important. I will continue to maintain if we built 6-story housing the length of El Cajon Boulevard from Park to the city of La Mesa, we would solve our crisis for a number of years. Yeah, the growth would continue to eat away at that, but there is enough land. I didn't say there's not enough land. There's not enough greenfield land where you can afford to build single-family homes. There's lots of land, and every time we upzone, we essentially manufacture land, right? By creating the potential for more housing. So I do think that we can get ahead of this. I think it's going to require that the whole region act in many ways like the city of San Diego has. It also means we look at other practices that might be working. Carlsbad has an incredible inclusionary housing program. I think it's better than the city of San Diego. But we have, we can learn from each other. And so we can do those things. We can advocate for more federal resources, and we can pass, Prop 1 at the state to have more resources to build housing. It takes it's a yes and, like improv. It's yes and. Well, people are facing homelessness because we have not produced enough housing for decades. We need to produce that housing. Yeah. Well, no one's, I don't know of anyone having their vouchers taken. I know people are asked to pay more. Yeah, there's people actually having it taken away. Okay. Yeah, the emergency is, so what we're hearing, 314 households losing their emergency housing vouchers rate. That is real. So
We've got another question.
Hi. Okay. I've never done this before and I'm super nervous. So I don't want to mess this up. My boss told me not to tell everyone where I work in case I say the wrong thing. So I'm just coming to you. I'm coming to you as someone as a program manager who works in this industry. And absolutely, there's some weird things going on with funding. I'm only going to give you my personal take on things as a second chance employee who has 2 years clean.
congratulations.
Okay. Some stuff about affordable housing, I don't agree, but that's another conversation because I only paid for 2 hours of parking. So that being said, what I'm doing on my end, what programs are doing, who get contracts for subsidies, things are getting scary. And what I see is housing first. We're hearing now recovery first. As someone who went through the system of incarceration, federal side, that was my way. And it was very aggressive and it was very scary. And it was very scary to my family because I'm the black sheep. Nobody's ever done drugs in my family. I'm the baby. I'm the only girl. It was not supposed to be me. That being said, on my end, what I am doing and what I'm seeing is there's people who are unhoused and they're getting matched to programs and it's not really accurate. So there's clients who are deep in active addiction and they're matched to a subsidy program for 24 months. And in my program, because it's housing first, I can't tell them, you need to stop doing drugs. Someone told me that, a police officer, when I was in handcuffs. And that's what set me straight. That's not everybody's way of finding recovery. That's not everybody's way of finding stabilization. But I can tell you on the opposite side, programs are really doing their best to communicate to the county to say, hey, some clients just need help applying for disability. Some of my senior clients, it's scary. Those are the ones for affordable housing. If there's any emphasis, go to them because they're on fixed incomes. I have a client living downtown that's in a really nice senior apartment, $700 a month. His rent just increased to $100. To him, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a huge increase. But I just wanted to say that. I know things are iffy and sometimes subsidy programs get kind of a hard rap from everybody, even my clients. I get yelled at a lot. I get yelled at by landlords in the county and everybody. There are really great moves so that the people who can afford rent, people who are finishing treatment, who can pass a drug test, who have gone through homeless court and they have their I-9 docs, those are who should be filtering into these affordable housings. It's kind of hard, no matter what housing program they're in, if housing programs continue to work with affordable apartments. Oh, no, that's it. That's all. That's all my question. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm so
no,
sorry.
I appreciate, thank you, first of all, for being so open with us here today. I know it's not easy sometimes to share your experience, and we recognize that a lot of the decisions we're making are in a scarcity environment. And we tend not to make, it's not that we don't have, that we're making bad choices, it's that we don't have many good choices available to us. I mean that collectively as well as individually. We need more resources so that we're not choosing between different people who gets the resources. Right now, we look for the most high vulnerability individuals to go into some of that affordable housing. When somebody who maybe just needs housing and no services, we're not building in that sector. That's following, that's a result of other guidelines and other kinds of externalities. We can change, but these are policies we need to change. But we also need to get to a place. I don't want to continue the rest of my life to be seeing scarcity choices made in what is, even today, even with all this going on, this is still the wealthiest nation this world has ever known. We should not be making scarcity choices in America. We should have enough housing for everybody. And in the meantime, we're going to come up with imperfect solutions, and none of it's going to serve everybody. But I really appreciate your perspective and hope you'll have a chance to speak up when the representative is here as well. Thank you. I have a last question from Zach, it looks like.
Hi, Steve. You know me, I'm a lifelong San Diegan. Grew up in Normal Heights and currently live in Claremont. I think one of the things that we see is our neighbors saying no to housing in our neighborhoods. They say no to every intervention that we have for homelessness. And just recently I was talking with a friend who was complaining about homelessness, and then he was telling me about a new complex that was going to be on top of a Target in Claremont. And then he was complaining that they were going to take the parking away. So I don't know how those two things dovetail together, but I think, how do we turn this around? How do we get people to say yes to housing?
Well, so part of it is education, people, helping to folks to understand what housing is, why housing is priced as it is. It takes a lot of public education. And that means that each and every one of you has to be an ambassador for housing. And to be honest in your community and say, if you are wanting to solve homelessness, you can't be against new housing at the same time. Yes, we can demand quality housing. Yes, we can demand that the housing is in the right place, but don't say no to housing. We need to say yes. And that's really the answer in the long term. And I think as time goes by, as people get more used to seeing, first of all, what affordable housing looks like. I mean, this picture right here is a lovely building. That's for seniors at 50%, 50 and 60% of area median income. That's a nice neighbor. That's a building that brings stability to the neighborhood. It brings spending power because they're saving money on rent. They can spend in the nearby shops. It's as lovely as every other market rate apartment building being built in North Park right now. We need to get out there. We need to tell that message. I would encourage you one more time, please go on to housingsandiego.org. There's a button you can click to get a regular newsletter from us. It will keep you posted on opportunities to advocate for housing. And we will hear your comments in return. We want to know what your experience is, and we want to bring folks along with us as we go on this journey. We can solve this problem. It's going to take more than my lifetime, I'm going to guess. It's going to take more than the lifetimes of many people here, but it's going to happen, if not for us, for our children, and we have an obligation to solve this. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention here today. And we'll get to introduce our special guest. Is she here? Okay. Thank you, Bruce.
Let's give one more hand for Steve. Thank you so much, Steve. Your water. Yeah. Thank you again, Steve. We're so happy to have you as our president and CEO of the organization. So thank you again for being here tonight. We know that conversations about the cost of living are not just conversations about numbers or policy, right? So these are conversations about our lives, our communities, our neighbors, and whether we can afford to stay in those communities for the long term. I really appreciate each one of you choosing to be here tonight. We know that you have choice, and that's a big part of what we talk about here, not only for housing, but also, mobility and all of that. We talk about choice. So really want to thank you for choosing to be here. I also want to thank our partners and supporters for being here with us tonight and helping us be together. Specifically, the University of San Diego for hosting us in this beautiful venue. So thank you to USD. And also to our team members and volunteers tonight who have been amazing, especially the group from Volunteer with Chelly. I don't know where that group is at the moment, but they're here and lovely. So we're really happy to have you here. We're fortunate enough to also have an amazing staff member who led this. Her name is Julieta Ornelias Morales. I just want to do a quick shout out. She has put all of this together and really did all of the basic and large things that needed to happen. So thank you, Julieta. Tonight, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, who represents the California's 51st Congressional District here in San Diego. We're grateful to have the opportunity to hear from her about what is happening in Washington, and just importantly, for her to hear directly from all of you. So if you haven't already, please remember to fill out one of these community town halls and give them to us. We just realized that we need to know both your seat number and the row you're in, so we may have a little bit of a challenge grabbing people, so forgive us in advance. We're really grateful to hear from her, and so really creating space for a meaningful conversation between the community and the people who she serves and the people who represent us here in community. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. We'll go ahead and get started with some thoughts from you. If you could share just a quick little intro for yourself and a hello to everyone.
Yes. Well, hi, everyone. I'm so happy to see you all here. It is so great to be here with you all. And thank you so much to the San Diego Housing Federation for putting this on. Look, I know that watching the news and the never-ending bad news is a challenge right now. And you all are doing exactly the most important thing you can be, which is showing up on a Wednesday night to ask your elected officials questions, to tell us about what you're experiencing. That is literally what we need right now, right? To be in community, to stay in community, and to make sure you're holding me and all of your other elected officials accountable. So I'm so grateful that you all are here. And, I think it's important to acknowledge that while this current administration has made our cost of living crises way worse, we here in San Diego know that we've been in a cost of living crisis well before Donald Trump was president. And that means that the solutions aren't going to be enough to just go back to what we had before this administration. Because before this administration, my friends from high school still couldn't live in San Diego because they couldn't afford to. So they all moved away. And even before the Trump administration, we had skyrocketing rents and housing costs and record levels of homelessness. So I think we can both acknowledge the things that the Trump administration is doing that are making things worse, like the Iran war that's driving up the cost of gas and the tariffs that are driving up the cost of, well, basically everything. And also acknowledge that we have some real systemic failures that we need to address. For instance, you guys know I spend a lot of time talking about childcare. Well, even before Donald Trump, 40% of San Diego families couldn't find childcare that met their needs. And 2/3 of San Diego kids live in a childcare desert. So I am working hard on a plan to get universal childcare for every kid in this country. Because we know that high quality early childhood education is not just about one kid, it's about a family, it's about our economy, and it's about how we set up the future that we want. You all also know, and I heard from back there, you guys already talked a little bit about healthcare, but obviously we are bracing for the cuts that are going to come from OBBA, the one big ugly bill. We're already seeing the impacts, and it's only going to get worse. More than 1 in 4 San Diegans rely on Medicaid to get their health care. So, that combined with the ACA tax credits, the Covered California subsidies going away, we're all going to be paying higher prices at the hospital and the doctor's office to make up for that. And then obviously we're here mostly to talk about housing. Housing has been an issue here in San Diego County for a long time. I am happy to say that this is one area where we actually did something in Congress in a bipartisan way, in a pretty big way this year. So I'm really proud that we were able to pass the 21st Century Road to Housing bill. It's the biggest housing bill in a generation. And basically, what it does is a few key things. It restricts institutional buyers from being able to buy single family homes. It cuts red tape and rewards cities to get them to actually build and zone for building more homes. Um, I'm also working on an effort to try and ban the rent setting algorithms that corporations are using. And we know the city of San Diego has already done that, and I'm excited to try and take that at the national level. But there's so much more work we need to do. And while I know you all are here to ask me questions, I'm actually here to mostly listen to you all because we don't have all the answers. And frankly, on housing in particular, we don't have a lot of good answers, right? So much of housing policy is split between state and local and federal government. Like, I actually need your guys' help in figuring out what are the federal levers we can be using to try and address the housing crisis. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions and hearing your ideas and hearing all the ways that you're going to help me figure out how we can address the cost of living crisis here in San Diego.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. One more hand for her real quick. Before we get into our conversation, I would like to invite all of the volunteers and the team members who helped make tonight possible. So if you could come up here real quick for a quick photo with the Congresswoman, that'd be lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. All right, let's get into our questions. So happy to have you here. I know we've had some nice conversations throughout your time, and we're really proud to work with you and connect with your team on a regular basis. So you represent one of the most expensive congressional districts in the country. When you describe the cost of living crisis in San Diego to your colleagues in Washington, how do you make them understand the scale of what families have here and what they're actually experiencing?
It's a really difficult question because it's something I have to do like every single day. So you guys know I got elected in 2020. I've been talking about how expensive everything is since I first started running for Congress because here in San Diego, it's been expensive since then. But when I first got to Congress, I was like, guys, we need to talk about how expensive everything is, and in particular, housing. And like, I would say I got met with crickets. And it wasn't really until 2024 and the 2024 election that I think my colleagues really started to understand that the cost of living is an issue and that housing in particular is an issue. And that's way longer than it should have taken. And I think part of it is that, like, it's no surprise to many of you that Congress is older and whiter and richer than the average population of the United States. And yeah, if you bought your home in the 60s or the 70s, housing is not an issue for you. You're living pretty good. And there weren't a lot of young people, right? Like, we are getting and more of us who understand what trying to enter the housing market is like now. But we're still not that many in Congress. And so even just the generational aspect of it across the country, right, was something that took a lot of explaining. And then, of course, here in San Diego, like the costs are so ridiculous. You know, I'll give you an example. When we were fighting over some provisions in what would have been Build Back Better, and trying to get some of these really great things, I had to fight really hard to get people to qualify for some of those provisions if they made 250% of state median income. Because in a place like San Diego, where the median home price is $1 million, it actually takes a good chunk of money to make ends meet here. And those numbers that we say, they sound really big if you live in like Oklahoma, where
My home state.
oh yeah, exactly. And so, you know, or West Virginia, which was the person I was trying to convince the most. Right? Like, you know, we have a salary floor in Congress. It's like $43,000 or something like that. You have to pay everyone that, which like for some of my colleagues, that makes their employees the highest paid people in their district. And so working with people from all across the country in all different situations, it is kind of hard. And sometimes they will try and say like, "Oh yeah, but you're in California, like you guys chose this." Or like talk to your state about why everything's so expensive. We shouldn't have to deal with it, right? So like it is hard, but I do finally feel like on both sides of the aisle, people now really do understand that housing and costs are a really big issue, and we are getting some momentum to address them.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's really interesting to hear the floor conversation. I don't know that I knew that, so I'm sure that there's probably a couple of aha moments here. This really everyone should be making that. Okay, so Washington has been divided on a lot of things lately, but the Road to Housing Act passed by overwhelming bipartisan support. What does that moment tell us about where there's actually appetite for progress in housing, and how do we build upon it?
Yeah. So it's super exciting. And I think it's one of those things where you have to prepare and prepare and prepare and be ready for when the moment is right and you can finally do something. A lot of the provisions in the Road to Housing Act were bills that, you know, my colleagues had been introducing for years. And so I think part of it is like there was preparation done to be ready for that moment. And I think part of it is that like because housing is happening everywhere now. Like I sometimes tell my colleagues that like we here in Southern California, we're on the forefront of everything, which means like we were having a housing crisis and now everyone's having a housing crisis. Um, polka dots were in here and now polka dots are in everywhere. You know, like we're at the front of everything. Um, and so we are starting to see that even in some of these other places that haven't historically had housing crises, that they are starting to have them. They look a little bit different than ours, but they are having them. And that means my colleagues from both sides of the aisle all across the country are hearing it from their constituents, which makes it easier to be able to do these big things. I also think like, you know, it's funny often when I hear President Trump talk about what he wants to do on housing, it's like all the Democratic ideas he took, and we're like, okay, great, then let's do it. You know, in his State of the
Good
Union,
idea.
yeah, in his State of the Union, he talked about like banning corporate investors from buying single family homes. So it's like, all right, well, we've been trying to do that for a while, but great, let's do it. You know, part of it is this moment where I think because housing is so complicated, it hasn't quite bifurcated on the partisan lines yet. And so there is that space. And I want like everything feels impossible right up until the moment it happens. And so as other big things feel impossible, just know that everything feels impossible literally until the moment it happens. But we can still do big things and we can still get big things done. And this is just the start of what we're going to do.
That's so powerful. Thank you for that. One of the things that Steve and I talk about a lot is when he and I first started with the Federation, we had a hard time for San Diego to believe that we had a housing crisis. And that was 11 years ago, y'all. That was not that long ago. So to have conversations with your colleagues, I'm sure, is really interesting. Housing choice vouchers are one of the most direct federal tools for keeping low-income families housed. But the program has faced serious underfunding. What's your ask of your colleagues to stabilize it? And what's your honest read on whether it gets done?
Yeah. This is a toughie because right now in this administration, we are mostly playing defense, right? So like I have grand ideas on what we could do to actually fix the system. And, Maxine Waters has a bill that would make it an actual entitlement, which means if you're eligible, you automatically get it, like Medicare, et cetera. But for now, what we're fighting to do is to at least protect the funding that we currently have. So the president sent a budget, and I have the exact numbers here because I don't want to say the wrong thing, but the president sent a budget that would cut the housing vouchers by about 13%, so $10.7 billion, and does a lot of other bad things like zeroes out CDBG and home and the continuum of care funding and freezes new vouchers. So that's like the worst case scenario, which we're trying to fight against. This year's HUD budget, so what the number we're currently operating at is 77.3 billion. And our goal would be basically to keep it steady. We are kind of when we can hold things steady, it's a win in this current environment. And so that's kind of the fight right now. In the House bill that passed the House committee but has not yet passed the House floor, there is also a cut. The cut is smaller than in the president's budget. It would cut 5.9 billion, so 8%. It would allow voucher renewals, but short of what rental growth is. It cuts home by 60%. It cuts other homeless grants by 256 million. It gets rid of fair housing enforcement, basically. There's no Senate version of the bill yet, so we don't know what the Senate will do. But basically, goal, keep it steady. Worst case scenario, president's budget. House committee budget, not great. Usually the Senate is where we can fix some of these things because they need 60 votes. I will also say, though, that there is an interim fight, which is that basically in every election year, you pass a stopgap funding. So our budget cycle ends September 30th. If we pass nothing by September 30th, there will be a shutdown. But normally in an election cycle, you pass a short-term continuing resolution, it's called, which gets you past the election, and then you negotiate the next year's appropriations. So the House passed a continuing resolution. The Senate also passed one. Both of them basically just keep the housing voucher number steady. We anticipate that when we get back, first week of September, that we will be voting to pass the Senate's version of the continuing resolution, which does hold the housing voucher number steady from what it is this year. So at least through December 11th, that will likely be the situation. And then we will, in that interim time, be fighting over what the actual HUD appropriation number will be and fighting hard to keep it at that sort of $77.3 billion number.
Thank you so much for that information. I think it's really interesting to hear all the different ways.
Yeah, sorry if it was too wonky.
I think some of this group probably likes the wonkiness, so we're all right. If you had to name 2 or 3 things that would most move the needle on housing affordability at the federal level in the next 2 years, what would they be?
So fully funding the housing vouchers would be one of them. I think the second would be fixing LIHTC, the low income housing tax credit. That's, what undergirds a lot of our ability to build affordable housing here in San Diego, and across the country. And then third, one of the things that the 21st Century Road to Housing bill did is it created an innovation fund that would reward cities and states that do things to help build more housing. And right now, all of the bills, the appropriations bills, have that innovation fund funded at $0. So while it is created, it is not funded, but actually funding that innovation fund and some of the other aspects of the 21st Century Road to Housing, and making sure that HUD actually implements it well, I think will be the third thing. And the fourth thing, which I know you said two or three, is whatever brilliant ideas you guys tell me.
I think that gives us a nice segue for right after this, we'll go into audience questions. What's the most important thing that residents, advocates, and local organizations in San Diego can do to strengthen your hand in Washington on these issues?
Yeah. So I love hearing from you all, from my constituents. And I especially love hearing from people who are directly either dealing with or impacted by these federal decisions that are being made. So it's a lot of what happens is like we're dealing with these giant spreadsheets of numbers, and someone will be like, oh, we can make this all add up by just, cutting 1 decimal point here. And what I try and make sure we're doing, that I'm doing, but that I'm also helping my colleagues do, is understand that those are not just decimal points, those are people. And so the more you all can share with me exactly how these cuts are impacting you, exactly how these things are happening that are, impacting your life, the personal stories really resonate a lot more with my colleagues than statistics. I'm a nerd, so I love statistics, but like the personal heartstring stories are really what get my colleagues motivated, I found. So really sharing your personal stories is incredibly helpful. And also letting me know what's going on. So like, I've got about 800,000 people I represent right now, give or take. And I have amazing staff here in San Diego, but there's only 6 of them. So we do try and be everywhere all the time, but we really rely on partners in the community and also individual residents just telling us what's happening, what issues they're facing, so we can try and fix it. In the last administration, we were told by a bunch of community folks that all of a sudden a bunch of HUD BASH vouchers were getting denied. And we were able to go to the VA secretary and get them to fix the problem. But we can't do that unless you guys tell us there's an issue. Now, I don't know if this VA secretary would fix it, but we don't know until we try. So like the more you guys can keep us informed, the more we're able to actually solve things. And in particular, if there are things where you're like, oh, there's this one federal thing that's just like annoyingly getting in the way of us being able to do something awesome that could maybe just be like a small tweak on our end, but would be like a huge impact. Those are the things we love hearing about because we can, a lot of the times actually still get those fixed even amidst all of the chaos.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for going above and beyond in what we're asking. So I appreciate that. Now let's get into the questions that y'all submitted. So we really want to hear from everybody in the room. First question, for organizations in this room that work on housing and affordability every day, what's the best way to build a relationship with your office so the community expertise actually informs policy decisions?
An excellent question. I have my amazing staff scattered throughout the room here, and they would love to talk with you. And I always love coming to do tours and coming to meet with you, and in particular, meeting with community members and residents and really hearing the situation. One of the most important things you can do is give me your ideas because especially now that we've passed the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, that was kind of not all of the ideas people had, but like a lot of them. And now we have to figure out what's next. And there is still so much more work to do, but I need your guys' help in figuring out what we at the federal level can do to address that.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
also you can submit meeting requests on my website. If I can't take the meeting, one of my staff members will. You can submit tour requests, all of that. We try and say yes to as much as we can. So we'd love to hear from you.
Next question, curious for any insight you may have in federal funding and recent changes, congressional earmarking specifically.
Yes. Okay, so I went through the HUD numbers, so I won't bore you again with all of the numbers, but I do think the big fight is going to be what happens in the transportation and housing and urban development appropriations bill that we negotiate for the upcoming year for FY27. We also have community project funding, which is basically what we call earmarks now, where we are able to give congressionally directed funds directly here to San Diego. Next year, we already submitted for FY27. We will likely get every year, the rules change a little bit in terms of what accounts are open and who's eligible to apply for which accounts. We will likely have that information in March or April. We will make sure to get it out to all of you and work with you all because I would love to get CPF projects that would address housing and the cost of living here in San Diego. That is one of our key priorities, and we are always looking for good community project funding projects that we can submit for that. Just to give you an example of what some previous ones we've been able to do. So on housing, for instance, we got $850,000 for the county to do a safe parking site in Grantville. We got $2 million for San Diego Housing Commission's Linda Vista Affordable Housing Project. We got $850,000 for San Diego Unified to have a mobile washer and dryer unit. We got $500,000, or we're working on getting in FY27. It's in the House committee version, but it hasn't actually become law yet. $500,000 for the San Diego Housing Commission's Belden Village affordable housing upgrades. So those are the kinds of things we can generally do, but we are always looking for ways to have cool, new, innovative community project funding. And we also have a federal grants newsletter that we send out. So if you guys would like to be on it, make sure you tell one of my team members around the room, where every month we send out all of the federal grants that are open. Now, I will warn you, it is a hefty document. So you have to like Control F for some keywords. And then we also, if you're a nonprofit and you are submitting for a federal grant, let us know because we can do letters of support and things like that. And we'd love to help make sure we get as much federal dollars into San Diego as we can.
Thank you for that offer. I know there's some people in the room that probably would like to lean into that offer. Congress has a lot on its plate at any given moment. Foreign policy, budget, healthcare, immigration. How do you make sure housing and cost of living don't get crowded out by anything else competing for its attention? And how do you build coalitions with colleagues who may not see it as a top priority?
Yeah, so the good news is that right now in this political moment, I think everyone recognizes that cost of living is an issue. But I've been in Congress for 6 years now, and I've lived through many political moments, and cost of living have not always been the issue. And so I do think we need to take advantage of this moment that we're in, where everyone recognizes we need to address cost of living and also recognize that it's not going to last forever. And so I'm always thinking about how we build those coalitions. One of the things I spend a lot of time on, sitting on the House Armed Services Committee and, representing San Diego and our large military community, is military housing. Because we know that if we can get the military to house more of their service members in military housing, that takes a lot of pressure off of the rest of the housing market here in San Diego. Now, sometimes
Yeah, you can clap.
We're working on a couple of cool things, including trying to get them to build more dense housing for junior enlisted folks and more housing on the bases themselves. So we are trying to get them to house more service members. One like for some of my colleagues, they also represent big military communities, and so military housing is an issue for them. But for a lot of my other colleagues, the way I talk to them about it is as a readiness issue, right? Because if service members are living an hour and a half away from base because it's the only place they can afford to live, what happens when we need to call them in for an emergency? They're spending 3 of their hours of their day driving, commuting back and forth, instead of spending more time doing their job or taking care of their family, right? If they're not living in safe housing, like they're not able to focus on their job, they're worried about the safety of their family. And so a lot of the way I talk about housing, obviously for many of us, we just care about it. But for others, I talk about it as a military readiness issue. Because you might not care that my constituents have black mold in their housing, but you probably do care that the aircraft carrier is not going to be fully staffed because they have to deal with that at home and can't do the job we need them to do for our national security. So that's a lot of how I try and do that sort of coalition building.
Thank you for that. I think it's great to hear the lens that you lean into when you're talking to your colleagues. You've been in Congress now for a few years. What's something?
6 years, you guys.
Yay! What's something about how the institution actually works behind the scenes, really getting things done that surprised you? And how has it changed the way you approach your work on issues like housing and cost of living?
Okay, so I'm sure many of you like watched The West Wing growing up, right? Yeah, it's nothing like The West Wing. Okay, I would say,
Bummer.
yeah, it's not Scandal either. It's Veep is the most accurate if you want to know of like which portrayal is the most accurate. But like, I so rarely, so very rarely am actually sitting in a room debating policy ideas with my colleagues. Congress is high school. Well, it's like high school / middle school / college in different ways. So like you come for new member orientation. You pick which clubs you're going to be in. They're called caucuses, but they're just clubs. You make friends with the people who are like on your floor, you know, where your offices are. There's no official assigned seating on the House floor, but like there is. There is. There are cliques. And like, you know, in all seriousness, like understanding that it is actually just regular people trying to figure it out has really helped me because it's all about relationships. So like people will sign on to your bill or not because they like you or not because of the bill idea necessarily. And like things will get done or not get done because of who is like able to like push their thing forward, not necessarily because it's like the best idea. And so I really spend a lot of time focusing on relationships and how I can make sure I'm building them within my caucus and within, you know, within the Democratic caucus across all the ideological divides, but also with Republicans, so that we can do bipartisan things. And, you know, I think a lot of people think of bipartisanship as like how can we get like the most watered down version of something that's kind of like the lowest common denominator that everyone can agree on. That's not how I do bipartisanship. I try and find the areas where we're trying to do big things that we agree on and then try and do big things together. So like we have been working to get fertility and IVF covered by TRICARE, the military insurance program, in a bipartisan way for a long time. And we're very close to getting it done. We're like one Mike Johnson away from getting it done. But like that's not a small thing. Like that will be hugely impactful. And we often see that when TRICARE starts covering something, private insurance starts covering it too. That's how I think of bipartisanship, not like how do we come to a lowest common denominator, watered down thing that's not actually going to solve a problem. Yeah. But really, guys, it's high school.
We have time for one more question, and then we'll go into the community for feedback. It appears that mostly those with housing are the ones fighting housing, i.e. boomers. How do we get these people on board? They file lawsuits, which only increases the prices.
Yeah. Sorry to the boomers in the room, but it is so interesting to me how generational a lot of these fights have become, right? Because again, if you bought your home in the 60s or the 70s, first of all, you're pretty happy when home prices go up, right? Because that's your like source of income. And especially here in California, where it doesn't, I mean, you're not paying more property taxes, you're just getting sort of the equity upside. Um, uh, and also, my current sort of frustration is that about 70% of the federal budget goes to the elderly or seniors, people over 65, right? Because so much of our budget is taken up by Social Security and Medicare. And like, we should be taking care of our seniors, to be clear, but we shouldn't only be taking care of our seniors. And if we're not investing in the next generations, then we're going to have a real problem. And so, you know, I do think we need to be doing a lot more to make it easier for young people to afford housing, to afford rent and buying homes. One of the things I'm like trying to work on, it's like we're seeing a lot of people not move out of their homes because they're worried if they do, they won't get a mortgage at the same interest rate they had, or they will have to pay more property taxes because of our system here in California. And so how do we incentivize people moving out of their homes and selling to first-time home buyers, for instance? So we're trying to think through ideas of how to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's and part of what the 21st Century Road to Housing does is it does streamline some of those pressure points that people can use to slow down housing so that they aren't available as options. But I think the more we can talk about it as like those personal stories, right? Like, don't you want your kid to be able to afford to live in the same community you live in, right? Like, I I'm working on this big childcare thing, and I want to do like a campaign that's like, you know, because I have a Jewish mother and I've not given her grandkids yet, to be like, hey, you want grandkids? Instead of calling your kids, call your member of Congress. Um, It worked until my mom reminded me that I am, in fact, her member of Congress. So she is doing what I told her. But like, I think we have to figure out how to do the same thing on housing, right? Like, you want grandkids, you want your kids to be able to like build a family. Like, we've got to fix this housing crisis because I can tell you for sure, I'm 37. So basically, the only thing I talk about with my friends is like who's having babies, who wants to have babies, who doesn't want to have babies. And like, it all comes down to whether or not you feel like you can afford to have a family. And so I don't know, maybe that's how we get the boomers on board. Make it about grandkids.
I think that's a wonderful segue. So thank you so much. We're going to now call on folks to give their public testimony. We are going to give everybody just 2 minutes. So we want to make sure we can move along. So when we call your seat number, please raise your hand. And Jason over here has a microphone, then he'll bring it to you. The first one we're going to do is seat 114, 114. I think there's 2 different people that could be. Make sure that I think both of you submitted. So we'll do first row and then we'll do second row after.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name's Natalie, and I have been in contact with your office, and I do have a personal story. And this is, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not a rude person, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it's very cringeful listening to this conversation. I am personally affected. by an EHV. I did have a 19-year-old boy who's my son that did move away out of his house. He was born and raised here. We need to get down to what the root of the problem is with the administration. There's fraud. We have AI now. You can do the history. It's fraud, fraud, taken money, HUD, fraud, fraud, and none of that money paid back. I was never a part of the system. I can't get out of it. I'm in a trap. All of these things that are being said today is not taken lightly from me. And I have a story. I am part of the Creek Muskogee Nation, the first civilized tribe recognized in the United States, and I have nowhere to go. COVID was created in a lab. That is proven fact. We have a crime against humanity. None of it is funny to me. It's very serious. And what are we supposed to do? I don't believe anything that anybody says. I question everything. I had a 19-year-old boy move away. That's my baby. I didn't create COVID. I didn't become homeless because I didn't do something right. I did the American dream. I fell for that bait. It's a scam. And until people are held accountable, the federal government, HUD, what they're saying now, I didn't have a mental illness. I don't have a learning disability. I didn't have any disabilities, but I'm watching my husband. I've been married. I've been with 30 years. Deteriorate. And I'm a pretty positive, outlooking person.
15
My
seconds.
question is, what is going to be done? Who's held accountable? Because this is, to me, cringeful and it's word salad.
Thank you so much.
Well, I just want to say I'm sorry if it seems like I'm making light of any of this. The- yeah.
Thank you so much thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next 114. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kristina Shilkunova, and I'm a founder of nonprofit organization who serve Ukrainian community here all over San Diego. First of all, I would like to say thank you because some of my people who have been in the detention center and you help him personally. And another question I have probably not belong to the housing, most belong to the people who stay on the gap under humanitarian parole. So, you know, they on the July 22nd, they lost their work authorization. And I suggest them to contact you. So they write you a few different letters. Please check it out. And today, one of the girl also sent you the letter. So I would like to ask, what is the time manner you can, you know, support our community? And it's around 10,000 people. And also, I would love to have a letter of support for any kind of funds from your office as well.
Wait. This is public comment, so it doesn't necessarily require an answer to a question, and we didn't hear a question. But if you had a question, I appreciate your concern. And yes, if you had a question, you could have asked the question. Yeah.
I haven't had a response on anything, on any multiple questions that he's going to do what.
We're going to ask you to sit down so we can move on. Thank you.
Hang on.
Yes, thank you. Do you want to address any of that? Yeah.
On the humanitarian parole, we are doing some casework for folks. So if there are people who are having a hard time hearing back, and they live in my district, they should contact us, and we can try and figure it out. What is challenging is that humanitarian parole is an administrative decision. And so because it was not a law passed by Congress, there's only so much we can do when this administration decides how they want to implement immigration policy. And we all know that they are doing everything they can to undermine even legal immigration. But please do have folks, if they live in my district, reach out and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you. We now have seat 108. There's 2 people for that seat as well. So one up here in the front. Why don't we go with this gentleman first? Well, actually, you're closer. You go there first, and then we'll go here. Again, 2 minutes to speak.
So the government is good at making empty promises. And you were just saying how you wanted people to share their personal story. And that woman was doing that. Natalie was sharing that. And I think it's hard for people to get down to the point because they're so emotionally enveloped in what's going on. And I even asked a question to Steve earlier, and I feel like there's a lot of sidestepping of this question and just talking about the funding when we're talking about future housing and affordable housing, when we can't even sustain affordable housing in this moment because funding is being cut. These promises are being made to people that are desperate to get into something. Like she's facing being homeless right now because she was promised housing until 2030. So we're making promises to people that can't be kept. And so what are we going to do about that? Because as you sit here and talk about going and getting more funding and things like that, I mean, that's potential only until December. So there's no long-term, outcome for people to go, yes, I trust that you're going to do that. Let's put more money into this affordable housing. I mean, if you can't be trusted to produce it now, how can we trust that you're going to produce it in the future? And what are we going to do about the people that are facing homelessness right now because of this problem?
Thank you.
No, it's a good question. And look, I think that there is a lot of good reason to be mistrustful of government and institutions because it hasn't taken this issue seriously for far too long. I think part of the challenge right now is that this administration, the Trump administration, has done a number of things that make it harder for people to access affordable housing, such as cutting the emergency housing voucher program earlier than it was supposed to be cut. And we are trying to fight back against that. In fact, in the Senate's version of the continuing resolution, there is additional funding for the emergency housing voucher program so that it can extend longer than as it was supposed to do. But right now, everything is a fight. And I am constantly trying to get those dollars to our community here in San Diego so that people can get the housing that they were promised, so that we can make sure that everyone who's facing homelessness can get into housing so that we can do that kind of work. But it is a challenging funding environment in Washington, D.C. right now. And I have to fight for every amount. And so, we haven't even talked yet about the Trump administration's new proposed rule in HUD that's going to have try and institute a work requirement for these housing vouchers. That's going to try and put a 2-year limit so that you can only get a housing voucher for 2 years, right? There's a lot of things that this administration is trying to do that is going to make it even harder. And I am trying every day to stop that. I'm not successful all the time. I wish we were in a place where I could tell you, yes, this is just a clerical mistake. Everyone who needs housing is going to be able to get it, but that's not the case. We are literally trying to fight for the funding just to stay where it is so that people who already have housing can stay in it. That's the environment that we're in. And I'm spending, like, I'm fighting for that, and also fighting so that when we are back in power again, we're not going back to this system that is so broken, but we're actually using this moment to reimagine what our safety net can look like so that we can make sure that everyone is getting what they need. I think it will, and it's still part of the negotiation of what the final continuing resolution is going to look like. So I think it will depend what the final number is, exactly what the impact will be. But we will make sure when it gets passed that we can get that information to you.
Thank you. We had another 108 over here.
As you've discussed, many young people in San Diego, including my partner and I, are losing hope of ever owning a home. Assuming there is more support in Washington within the next 4 years, what is your vision to further stabilize the price of homes, and what can San Diegans do to help?
I mean, we need more housing, and we need more housing that people can afford. And I think a lot of what I'm thinking about doing is how do we use the levers of the federal government to make sure we're getting that increase in housing that we need. And that's through some of these like streamlining of red tape, like in the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. It's through this innovation fund. But again, it's also through thinking about like what are other innovative things we can be doing. And, you know, I don't have the answers. So if you guys have ideas, please let me know. But like, you know, part of the challenge is that you don't have starter homes in San Diego anymore because people aren't moving out of their homes. And so how can we incentivize people to sell to first-time home buyers? How can we, you know, try and like get more housing, but also get more housing people can afford by having that movement more. But we are literally always looking for good creative ideas on what else we can do from the federal government to bring down the cost of housing. So please, if you have a good idea or even a bad idea or just a crazy idea, send it in.
Crazy ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be F101. F101, if you're still here. Oh, back there. I think it's the gentleman at the right there. F.
Yes, hi, my name is Rafael Bautista. I'm the director of the San Diego Tenants Union. You know, you mentioned the wars, obviously the war in Gaza, you know, all these atrocities that are being committed with our money. We know what's happening with inflation and, you know, housing inflation. We know what's doing to communities, it's displacing communities, it's gentrifying communities. Sometimes this affordable housing is part of the problem. Last year, we had several buildings that were senior affordable housing and they faced 25% rent increases, right? We have an experience of seeing developers have different motives with this affordable housing, right? So we, as the San Diego Tenants Union, don't really have much expectation from you as part of the bourgeoisie to look out for the working class, but there are responsibilities that you have. And in the midst of fascism and the entrenchment of fascism, we know that you're not doing enough. It's obvious that you're not doing enough. You individually are not doing enough, and members of Congress are not doing enough. The Democrats are not doing enough, right? That's why the Dem socialists are replacing them now, right? So essentially what I'm trying to convey is that we need you to do more, and we need to do more radical steps outside of the system, outside of your procedures, and you know, you normalizing things. Because when you come in and people tell you, hey, you're detached from reality, it's because we see it and we understand. And when you tell us these stories about your friends not being able to afford to buy something here, it's you're lying to our face, right? So we need to see more action, and we need to see some unorthodox procedures, because we're looking at, you know, you just gave away the fact that you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to budget, or you're not going to be able to, you know, close government, giving away that negotiation point, right? So you don't even do the most basic of things. And we understand people would suffer during those times, but it seems like you're devoid from reality and not understanding the terror that ICE is imposing on our communities with our own fucking money, right? Caging our people in substandard conditions that are killing them, right? And you're not doing it enough. And you know, your visits and whatever, it's not enough. You're not doing enough. We need more action and real action, not just, you know, going to chit chat with your clubs. We need real results. And I would love to hear some approaches that you could take that are not within the norms. Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, I hear you. I'm frustrated that we can't do more. And like, I am literally wake up every day thinking about what more can we be doing to stand up to the Trump administration right now? What more can I be doing to protect people in our community from losing their housing, from losing their health care, from getting detained by ICE? And you know, actually before Congress, I worked in post-conflict stabilization and post-coup transitions in a lot of these countries with authoritarian governments. And I spent a lot of time talking to my friends and colleagues who have worked in these other countries that have experienced the kind of authoritarianism that we are experiencing here, to get ideas on what's been successful, what have their legislatures done that have worked. You know, we look at Hungary that's finally gotten rid of Orban. We look at Poland, that has a new president, but you know, it's not just those, right? It's Senegal, it's the Gambia. There are lots of examples of countries that have had this kind of democratic backsliding, and I've been trying to do and learn as much as I can from what's been successful there to make sure that we're doing it. But yeah, like we all need to be doing more.
You're acting as a rubber stamp.
Uh, We're gonna ask you to, that's enough. Thank you. Thank you. That's enough. Thank you. Please. Could you take care of that for us, please? Seat 109 is next. I'm not sure which row, back in the back. You have 2 minutes.
I used to work in the mortgage industry, so I understand that what determines the value of a neighborhood is what the people of the median income of that socioeconomic demographic can afford for monthly payment. And what happened was rates were way too low for too long. And because people could afford the monthly payment, they were offering more and more and more money on these houses, driving costs up. And then rates went up, and now people can't afford to buy at these higher rates. That's why the whole country is facing this challenge. San Diego started early because we had a major demographic change when we switched from our primary job source being a low, like the military was pretty low wages relative to the biotech that replaced the military. And so we had a huge upswing. And so we experienced that disparity sooner than the rest of the country, but the rest of the country is now experiencing it too. So just like what happened in 2008, we are on the verge of a collapse where the market is going to self-correct. And so I would like to see you do something proactive where Obama failed us miserably by bailing out the banks instead of bailing out the people. And so as this collapse starts, and it's going to start soon, I would like to see you put something on the table that guarantees that the people will be bailed out instead of the banks. Like the government will take the difference in equity, the mortgage payment at the lower equity rate. Was that clear? Like, you know, the house falls, the value falls, the mortgage should fall in accordance, and then the government will take that differential as opposed to giving the money to the bank.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I appreciate that suggestion. We'll kick the tires and see what's possible. I mean, I was in college when the Great Recession happened, and a lot of my friends' parents lost their homes, and we saw government bail out the banks when they should have been bailing out homeowners. So I completely agree with you that we need to figure out how we can be putting things in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. One of the things I've been kind of looking at is, are there ways we can put things in place that are like, the technical economic term for it is like automatic stabilizers, but that when certain things happen, it immediately kicks in. So it doesn't require Congress to have to like proactively do something once there's a crisis. So we will look into this specific idea and see if there's something we can do on it. But I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who shared with us tonight. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Congresswoman, we've now heard from the policy context and as well as questions and from the people who are asking directly. I'd love to offer you the final word. What are you taking away from tonight, and what should the community expect from you and your office moving forward?
Yeah. No, I really, really appreciate you guys being here and sharing your stories and asking your questions and holding me accountable. That is what my job is. That's what your job is as citizens. And I don't need us to always agree. I don't need you to always say nice things to me. I need to hear what you're really going through. And what I'm hearing is just how much people in our community are struggling right now. And I already wake up every day and try and think about what I can do to make our community better, to protect as many people as possible right now. But you all have given me even more ammunition to do that, and even more ammunition to talk to my colleagues and try and get them to do that as well. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing with me. I love hearing from you all. And please continue to reach out to my office. Continue to hold me accountable, continue to send me your ideas on what more we can be doing, because this is a moment that there's no wizard right behind a curtain. There's no one who has all the answers. It's going to take all of us working together to get out of this moment. And so I really rely on you all to help me do my job of representing you. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you again. Let's hear it for Congresswoman Sara Jacobs and say thank you so much for your time tonight. And thank you again to all of you for being here and for being part of this conversation. Thank you to everyone who asked a question or gave any kind of shared experience. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us tonight. Again, there's no single solution to the challenge, but bringing people together is really where we can make some change. So thank you and have a wonderful evening.